And so at any moment, this thing could go squirrels at a rave. It just could. Hello, welcome back to the Oak and Ember podcast. I am the house. Yep, I already blew it. See, this is the first episode, and I can't even do the intro. It only gets better from here, ladies and gentlemen. Only gets better from here. Man, I'm the host and founder, Garrett Hines. Welcome to the podcast, episode 1. You know, right even in the beginning, I'm trying my absolute best not to do two things. One, that's copy everybody else's intro, like the Hodge twins. I love their intro. I think they're hilarious. They make me laugh very hard. But it's not okay to copy their stuff. Maybe do a little modeling. We'll see. And the other thing I'm trying really hard not to do is have a full-blown Robin Williams, Good Morning Vietnam. This microphone makes me feel like I should do that, but I'm not going to. Oh, man. You know, one of the things I want to do with this podcast is film it and record it organically. Like, I don't want to edit any of this stuff. I want it to be as normal me as possible without any of those weird little cuts that happen when you edit stuff in film. Yeah, there's probably a better way to do it, but I'd not film on the camera. I want it to be organic. I want it to be natural and human and real and not uber produced, and I want it to be really good, and I'm going to need a lot of practice before I'm really good at doing all of this stuff. And so there's going to be a lot of this kind of thing. You know, there's a joke that I took from a meme a long time ago that I use every time I do a public speaking event, and that is this idea that, like, I've done my best to get some ducks. Like, I've got show notes, you know, I've got stuff all going on here to try and keep me organized. But the reality is, as much as I've tried to be organized, I am also by nature an artist. And so at any moment, this thing could go squirrels at a rave. It just could. I've tried to get some ducks. I've tried to put them in rows, but we might go squirrels at a rave here any moment. So, but I love doing this. I love the conversation that we can have when it's organic and fluid and natural. And, you know, like I'm even like right now, I'm struggling to look straight at the camera and be professional. And I'm also, like, when I think and I talk, my eyes go everywhere because I'm looking at this stuff in my brain. And so I don't know. Maybe this will be super irritating. Maybe it's not. At least I'm having a good time. So that's what we're going to do. Man, we do, though. We got a great show going on for you today. As always, this podcast is geared towards empowering men to live life fully alive. And that's my goal. And before we jump into that, I want to make a quick comment on some things that are going on in the news in the country right now. I think it's really important, and I'm going to do a whole show on this later, but I think it's really important that men are aware of what's going on in the world around them. I think if you keep your eyes closed to the things that are going on in your community, in your state, in your country, wherever you live, if you're keeping your eyes closed to that stuff, you are inviting catastrophe. It's just the reality. We cannot afford to be ignorant about what's going on around us. We can't afford to be uninformed about what is happening in our communities, in our country, in our politics, all that stuff. I think a wise man is informed to a level that is appropriate. Now, if you're somebody that can't watch the news without getting freaked out, then, you know, maybe little tidbits here and there, but I think it's important to be aware. So I want to comment on some of the stuff that's going on because I pay attention to this stuff, and if this is a podcast for men, then we ought to be able to talk about the things that are going on in the country around us. So, with that said, and as I'm looking at the video and trying to figure out if this is the right setting that I want to use, let's talk about what's going on in the world around us. You know, these episodes are filmed weeks in advance of when they're posted online. But that said, some of this may be dated, and some of this may still be a problem, or it could even get worse by the time this stuff airs. But it's a couple of things I want to point at today and talk about, comment on, and then we'll jump into today's topic. You know, there's been several press releases about different things going on, and the current administration's press secretary has made some statements, and one of them that Jen Psaki said that I find to be very concerning that's come out in this past week is that the administration is combing through Facebook in an attempt to find posts and accounts that they find troubling and encourage, at least that's how I'm interpreting it. I might be wrong, but they're encouraging Facebook to take those things down because it's quote unquote misinformation. And the last time I checked, that's problematic. One, because if the government is acting in a way that, I want to be real careful with my words here. I'm trying not to get banned on the first episode. But if the government is encouraging a private entity to do a certain thing, then as I understand it, as smarter people have told it to me, then what's happening is that private entity is now acting as a government agent. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going on right now. What I am saying is that we're talking about this in the political sphere as if it's not a big thing when it really is. Because if that's what's going on, then we've got some freedom of speech issues here. So that's number one. I don't care for that at all. First of all, when was the last time the government got things like super right? I don't know. I personally don't think. I mean, it's probably been a good long while. And flip this around. If this was a Republican administration and super horrible orange man was, his press secretary was saying the exact same thing, then everybody in legacy media, or whatever you want to call it now, there's so many terms for the big guys like CNN and MSNBC and Fox News and all that. If this was flipped around, there would be mass hysteria. There would be people screaming at the top of their lungs about how this is wrong. So that's where I get really frustrated with a lot of this stuff, because the obvious hypocrisy of one-sidedness. We say it and it's okay. Other people say it and it's absolutely terrible. You can't do that. It's wrong. I think that's horrible. It shouldn't be like that. So that's number one. Number two thing that I wanted to comment on, and I want to do this really gently and with a lot of care, because I think there are people who really need some help from my perspective. Granted, I have a perspective and other people have a perspective. But there's a show going on right now about transgender couples. Now, I have some personal beliefs about LGBTQ and transgender and all that stuff. I have some personal beliefs about that. I have some public beliefs about that. Then that's what I'm going to talk about. See, the beauty of living in America right now is that we enjoy a depth of freedom, right? And I mean, you want to live your life, live it. You want to live your life in the transgender sphere, like, go for it. That's your choice. You're free to choose that. Where I have a problem is when advocates for a particular lifestyle are attempting to enforce that ideology on other people while simultaneously allowing and empowering people to live in a way that will not help them. Right, so take, for example, this show. And the clip that's going around the internet right now that I'm going to speak to may not be a big deal in a couple of weeks when this show airs. I don't know. Maybe it'll still be a thing. But I think it's important because stuff like this is going to continue until men and women stand up and say, hey, this is not okay. And here's what I mean by this is not okay. See, the show highlights a transgender male and a transgender female, a biological male and a biological female. Biological male identifies as female. Biological female identifies as male. And they, in the show, have just had a baby. And they attempt to breastfeed the baby through the biological male who identifies as female, who wants to be the mom. And the problem with that is biologically, like, if we're going to follow the science, that doesn't work. biological males do not have the body parts to breastfeed babies. And the thing about this that concerns me is that we're taking an entire show and we're advocating for something that is not helping people who are in that struggle. Like, gender dysphoria is not a small thing. Like, that's a serious deal. And instead of attempting to help people find the beauty of being male and the beauty of being female, we're creating a show that advocates for them to do things that don't help them overcome their struggle. Like, I think it would be equivalent to creating shows about drug addicts that empower the drug addicts to go deeper down the rabbit hole of their addiction. That sounds like a bad idea. And to me, that's what this show is doing. Now, I think the people in this show should be loved. They should be cared for. They should be helped. They should not be bullied. They should not be made fun of. Like, what they are going through with this whole gender dysphoria deal is serious. And from my perspective and the perspective of others, like, these people should be helped, not put on a show like some daggum circus where people are making money off of these people's life struggle. That's not okay. That's what bothers me about the show. It's not the transgenderism, although I have my personal beliefs about that. What bothers me is that we're making money off of people's mental disorder. At least that's how I understand gender dysphoria. It's a mental disorder. And I think that's terrible. I think it's actually really terrible. That's the whole deal. And so I wanted to comment on that because I think, as men in our society, we have to stand up for people who are struggling like this. We shouldn't be pulling away from that. We shouldn't be walking away saying, oh, those people have problems. I'm just going to watch the show and laugh. Or I'm just going to, label those people in a way that allows me to detach from them. No, like, we need to step into our communities and find ways to help people who are struggling with things like this. And man, I'm going to go really deep down the rabbit hole here for a second, because honestly, I think this starts at home with dads, right? So if you've got a biological male who identifies as female, I think that probably started at home with dad when these people were kids, or mom. Like, who is showing these kids what the true awesomeness, for lack of a better term, like, who's showing people how awesome it is to be male? Who's showing little boys how awesome it is to be male? Or who's showing little girls how amazing and beautiful it is to be female? And I guarantee you, some of this stuff, if not all of it, is at the home level. And that's a big deal for me. I think our kids grow up to be what we teach them to be. And you look at some of these TikTok videos, and you look at Instagram and other places, and you got parents out there who are shoving this ideology on their kids. Yeah, your kids are going to be screwed up. That's what I believe. And I'm going to say it out loud because it needs to be said out loud. My son loves being a male because I've shown him that being good at being a man is awesome. And if I showed him that being a man was tyrannical and terrible and awful and abusive and all that stuff, well, yeah, he probably would have a problem. But here we are. So that's all I'm going to... that's all I'm going to say about that. I just want to comment on the country as a whole and the sphere and the stuff that's going on, because I think it's important to put a voice to these things and to speak up, because we got a lot of silent majority, silent minority people who aren't speaking up for fear of whatever. And I think we need a lot more voices advocating for the better treatment of people. Like, this is what it's about. That first story with Facebook and Jen Psaki and all that stuff, that's about people. You're attempting to take away the rights of people. And the second story is the same deal. Instead of turning these people's lives into a circus, you should be helping people. Like, everything we ought to do ought to be about empowering and making better the life of other people. All right, so let's get into today's topic. Some a little bit more lighthearted. At least I hope it's a little bit more lighthearted. Man, one of these days I dreamed that, that like politics will be funny again. Maybe, I don't know. At least that's what I'm hoping for. So I really wanted to start this podcast with what I think might be a fundamental necessity of manhood, right? This show is for men. Now, I want to be clear, because I didn't write this into the intro video that is up on YouTube right now. And I wish I would have, but I'm going to comment on it now. This show is designed for men. But ladies out there who are watching this, that does not preclude you from enjoying the content or learning from it, because the reality is you have men in your lives. Husband, son, father, uncle, granddad, pawpaw, whatever you call him. We call him granddad. There's a bird under my table, y'all. Just kidding. I film this stuff outside because it's the only space I got. Oh, there he goes. Okay. Oh, he caught a worm. See, this is why you can't edit this stuff out, because real life's happening and it's hilarious. I think he just ate the cricket that was making a bunch of noise under the table. That's hilarious. Anyways, ladies, this content can be as useful to you as it is for the men that it is designed for. Ladies, if you're married, I hope that this is the kind of stuff you would aspire to hold your husband to live up to, or to encourage your husband to find resources like this to become a better man, because when your husbands are better men, your life gets better. I've seen that in the years of my adulthood, that when men rise up and become epic, the lives of the people around them get better. So ladies, this is not designed for you. Number one, I'm not a woman. I don't identify as a woman. And so I can't speak to what it's like to do life as a woman. But I can speak to what it is like to do life as a man and how to do life well. And so that's why this show is designed for men. Not because I'm anti-female. Not because I'm some, what's the P word? Blasted on. Patriarchal. I'm not some patriarchal tyrant who only cares about men. Now, I actually care about the lives of women really well. And I think the best way to improve the lives of the women in our world is to help improve the lives of the men who do life with them. So there's that. All right, so let's talk about what we're talking about today. I think a fundamental necessity for men is to be able to tell their life story. And there's a lot of reasons that I think men need to be able to do that. Number one, your kids need to know what life was like for you, what your story is. When your kids know what your story is, they at least know in part how their story started, because their story started with your story. My story started with my dad's, his story with his dad's. And I think your kids need to know your story. Now, does that mean your kids need to know, does your 7-year-old need to know about your wild drinking nights in college? No, that's not appropriate for a 7-year-old. But does your son need to know that you lived life in a way that wasn't beneficial when you were in your 20s? Hopefully in your 20s, not your 30s and 40s. That would be weird, not good. Yeah, my 7-year-old knows that I struggled with some things. He doesn't know what they are or the depth of them, but he knows Dad made some mistakes growing up. And if I can help my son avoid those mistakes and stand on my shoulders to live life at a higher level than when I started at his age, then I'm doing what I should be doing as a man. So you need to know your story. And number two, it wakes you up to life. There are a lot of people doing life in a way that keeps them numb to the way in which they're living. And if you force yourself to sit down and write out your story, to tell your story, then what happens is you realize how you've been living. Your eyes become open to how you're doing life. And if your eyes become open to how you're doing life, then you know there are things that you can change. There are things that you can improve on. There are things you can be proud of. You can understand at least a little bit your parents' story. That will impact how your story is unfolding. makes you gracious towards your parents. That's a bonus. I didn't even write that down. But, man, my computer went and there we go. I'm figuring this stuff out. It connects you to the bigger narrative. There's a story going on in the world that you're a part of. And if you don't know your own story, you don't know how you connect to that. So then you just become a cog in the machine. Then you're just a functionary. And honestly, part of the problem with postmodern life right now is that we're attempting to just create cogs in a machine, to create functionaries, to create people who get up, consume, enjoy life a little bit, and then go to bed, and then repeat. And that's not living. We were made to be more than just functionaries. So you need to know your story. And then lastly, it allows you to see where you can grow. If you know your story, then you know where you can grow. If you know where you can grow, you know where you can get better. And if you're not growing, you're dying. Now, yeah, we're okay. I hear the argument. It's going to be in the comment section. We're all dying. Yeah, I get that. You're right. Yes, death comes for all of us. And I think about that. Not in a weird way, but in a kind of a stoicism way of like, man, if I film this podcast and I go down in 10 minutes, am I going to be okay? No, not am I going to be okay. Did I live life well? Did I film this podcast to the best of my ability? You know, if I walk out into the street and get hit by a truck. Yeah, I filmed it to the best of my ability. Okay. So you got to know how to tell your story. You got to know how have you been living and how do you want to do life going forward. And, you know, right now, I originally was going to do this episode by telling my story. The problem is the battery light on my camera is flashing, which is really unfortunate. So I'm going to change up this episode. I'm going to include my story in episode 2 because really what I wanted to do was set the stage for why, right? Simon Sinek says you got to start with your why. I love his work. He has helped me so much. So you have to know your why. And the why behind knowing your story is because you have to wake up to life. And the best way I have found to help people wake up to the life that they're living is to tell their story. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about specifically in practical detail, how do you do that? Where do you do that? With whom do you do that? So for now, we're going to go ahead and end this podcast. We've talked about some things. I've learned probably 50 things right now just about how I want to do this different. See, that's how I'm awake to what I'm doing. We're going to make this better. And then in the next episode, I'm going to give you some real practicals and I'm going to tell my story. Because that's where I want to start. I want to start with how I got here. So, men of the world, you can be amazing. And I hope that you take this information, get excited for the next episode, do all the things, click all the buttons. I'm still learning about all that. And until next time, wake up and live life well.